What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be reacting to this video by Reese Hub about the evolution of mythic weapons in Fortnite from Chapter 1 to Chapter 4. With the recent leaks of Chapter 4 Season 4, it seems like a lot of old mythics may be returning, so if you guys didn't play throughout all of Chapter 2, a lot of the information in this video might be helpful or relevant to you to kind of know what some of these mythics items do, and it's just interesting to see kind of how the concept of mythic items has changed over the years in Fortnite, because there has been a lot of development. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below which mythic item you hope to see return next season. And Reese's video channel will be linked down in the description below. Makes a lot of content like this and also like competitive oriented videos.
Fortnite's mythic items have gone from broken to bad to busted and everything in between. You may think this is where the story starts, but it's actually the Infinity Gauntlet.
Bro, Thanos was on another level.
This item was released as...
So this was in an LTM. The Thanos Gauntlet was probably the most overpowered thing ever in Fortnite, but it was its own game mode. So if you didn't want to play the Thanos mode, you just didn't have to deal with it. They ended up going away from that idea with future seasons, but I think the start was perfect. And I feel like it just gives a better balance, because they could make the Infinity Gauntlet overpowered and extremely broken, because the only people that had to deal with it were players that opted into it, you know? Whereas now they try to force things into pubs, and then you either get a lame mythic or a mythic that ruins the game, and very little in between.
Part of the Infinity Gauntlet limited time mashup on May 8, 2018. Over 5 years ago. We are all getting old. This game mode had one Infinity Gauntlet spawn randomly into the map, and whoever picked it up was teleported into the sky and transformed into Thanos, acquiring...
This is like the first ever collab to my knowledge as well.
His abilities. You'd have 1000 HP, be able to collect the Infinity Stones, hit the default dance, and of course kill everyone. Now this of course was part of an LTME limited time mode, so I'm actually not going to count it in this video along with all of these other ones that are LTM only. But the first to actually be implemented into the core game modes was of course in Chapter 1 Season 7, the Infinity Blade. Now if you don't remember this item, you probably don't have PTSD. It spawned at the pedestal at the top of Polar Peak, and essentially every single player would land and grab it. This was actually where some of the earliest drop maps were ever used to ensure you got there first. It gave you 200 HP and 200 shield and 50 siphon on elimination, plus 1 HP gained every single second. Every swing initially harvested materials, and it had 2 different types of attacks. It could do a launch, which did 20,100 damage, or it could do the swing, aka the Shing Shing.
Oh my god, no! Why? Is that in the game? Sing, sing!
Now,
I wish he would play the audio, or maybe he does.
The release of this broken item couldn't have come at a worse time, as this was one of the first tournaments ever hosted by Epic Games, the Winter Royale 2018. Naturally, the reactions were as you would expect.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! What?
Look at this shit. You fucking kidding me, Epic?
Thankfully, Epic admitted that they messed up, vaulted it, and this tweet just got shy of 100.
I guess he doesn't play the audio. It like had a noise, I think, when the player was near you holding it, and when they did that like lunge thing, it was so loud, and it was just like, I don't know, bro. You would hear a player using the Infinity Blade in the area, and then they would just be like landing on your head. It was so annoying to play the game then, and it was just in regular pubs. Like you just always had dealing with the player who had the Infinity Blade was like a win in of itself.
160,000 likes. Obviously, this item was not very well received. After going back to the drawing board, 2 seasons later, they released the Batman...
These were perfect.
...and grapnel gun and the explosive batarang as part of the Batman collaboration in Gotham City. Now, these...
Gotham City was a POI, it was a Rift Zone in Season X, and in this POI, the Rift effect was just that you had glider redeploy there, so it was way less annoying than any of the other Rift Zones, and the Batman mythics were very, very balanced.
These were significantly less powerful. The Batman's grapnel gun was a grappler that when released would give you glider redeploy, meaning
like it was just good mobility. You couldn't spam it for height. I wish this would come back in some way. I feel like this was very balanced.
That you couldn't just fire yourself up onto players on high ground, nerfing it quite a lot. And the Batarang only did 50 damage. It seemed like Epic were going in a good direction with the mythic item.
The Batarangs were just like irrelevant.
But most players don't remember this because there
I guess that's kind of how the hammers are right now, where those nail things.
mechs in this season.
He's tarping it in! again!
The next season was the release of Chapter 2, and in Season 1, you may think there was probably no mythics. However, there were actually 3. The mythic goldfish, which could randomly appear when fishing with a 1 in a 1 million chance. And this actually one-hit KO any player you hit with it.
There's like a
I didn't
meme
even
item.
realize that this was actually vaulted in Chapter 3, so it's...
I don't think I ever saw anybody ever actually using this. Like, it was very rare to get. And then you think, like, one-hit kill, that's busted, but it's, like, more inconvenient to use than a pump. And, like, this pump will one-hit if he hits a perfect shot. Like, it was more of, like, a meme, I feel like.
No longer in the game. There was also 2 Star Wars collaborations, the First Order blaster rifle, which despite having infinite ammo was basically useless, and the first iterations of the lightsabers, which was released on May the 4th, and would continue to be put back into the game every iterations of the lightsabers, which was released on May the 4th, and would continue...
No, they were added in December. So, like, there was, like, this Risky Reels event in December of that year, which kind of promoted the new Star Wars movie, and that's when they initially added the lightsabers. And the reason why I remember that and I'm so annoyed is because late Chapter 2, we weren't getting very many, like, Chapter 2, Season 2, we weren't getting very many updates, and then, like, them unvaulting the lightsabers was one of the updates, the few updates that we got, and it was just annoying. I don't know if I was just much worse at the game back then, but the lightsabers irritated me so much more back in the day.
Continue to be put back into the game every year. Now, these mythics were all part of either collaborations or just small little items added to the game for fun. However, the next season in Chapter 2 Season 2 would be where Epic Games really showed their plan for mythic items going forward. There were 6 mythics added this season. Now, these were available at 5 different locations spread throughout the map, making these drop spots significantly more powerful than other POIs. You could drop...
So, if you guys are newer to the game...
Going forward, there were 6 mythics added this season. Now, these were available at 5 different locations spread throughout the map, making these drop spots significant.
So, if you're newer to the game, we kind of have the vaults which spawn in, and then everyone gets the mythic flapjack from the vault, and then we have, like, the drum shotty on the island. The way it was then was, like, each POI had a boss, and if you killed that boss, you could get their gun. So, if you went here, you get the scar. If you went here, you get the drum. Whatever. And they were much more overpowered than what we have now with mythics, and we kind of had the same thing I talked about with the Infinity Blade, where, like, fighting the Infinity Blade user felt like a win in of itself, and if, like, you were able to eliminate them, you thought you were going to win the game. This felt the same way. Like, if you went Shark, and then you also made it over to here somewhere and were able to kill the person that had drum, like, you felt like you were winning that game.
Significantly more powerful than other POIs. You could drop at the Shark and get Sky's Mythic Assault Rifle, which did 37 body shot damage with it.
But it kind of created a situation where, like, everyone just landed at those vault POIs, and then, like, the lobbies would die very, very fast.
2 times headshot multiplier, and this is when aim assist went crazy. And get the Sky's Grappler, which was just a grappler with infinite ammo and no cooldown, so you could continually use mobility throughout the entire game. Anytime
74 headshot on that Scar, and it shot faster than a regular Scar. Like, it shot really fast.
I play build fight 1v1s and hear this grappler sound, I still get a mini heart attack because of how scary it was to fight a player like this in this season. I also remember a game where I saw a full trio die to Sky the AI. So, you know, it wasn't an easy fight by any means. You could land at the agency and kill Midas to get the Midas drum gun, which had 25 damage per shot.
Allegedly, the drum gun is returning in some capacity in Season 4. Based on a teaser we saw that had the drum on it.
The magazine size of 40. Now, you look at the reticule and think maybe this has a massive amount of bloom and it's hard to hit shots, but essentially, if your crosshair was anywhere near the player, the bullet magnet...
And this was a more overpowered version of a weapon that was already overpowered. When we had the unvaulting event in Season 8, there was, like, somewhat of a vote that you would do during the event to unvault a weapon. And the drum gun came back and it caused so much controversy in the community. And then a few seasons later, they add a more overpowered version of that overpowered weapon.
Was so strong that it would nearly always hit them, making it extremely easy to hit consecutive shots with this gun. Now, this had a damage per second of 250, which is the 4th highest damage per second of any mythic. But it was so strong in combination with the really strong aim assist this season that pro keyboard and mouse players like Epic Whale actually switched and learned controller this season just to abuse it. If you went down to the grotto and eliminated Brutus, you would get Brutus's minigun, which was a minigun which had infinite magazine size but required a cooldown if you sprayed it for too long. Now, there's pro players like Aqua as a great example who just went up onto high ground and sprayed this on the players all the way down below, and they conditioned the entire lobby to stay away from height because they knew that if they started to crank up, they were getting sprayed down by the...
And I believe this was the only minigun in the game at the time. I don't know if the regular one was in. It may or may not have been.
minigun. Now, the fire rate was what made it so
But I don't
strong,
think it was.
but what made it even more busted is the ammo hadn't even been capped at 500.
Like there was a regular minigun back in the day. I just don't know if it was unvaulted during this season or if the Mythic was the only way to have one.
Competitive yet, resulting in the players on height having 999 mini ammo each, essentially 2,000 ammo to continually spray at the players down below, which meant that anyone that got close to them didn't stand a chance. If you went to either the yacht or later on in the season the box factory, you could get the Meowsicles Pew Pew rifle, which did 44 body shot damage, 88 headshot, which was incredibly good for Surge, but it was pretty inaccurate
This was not it.
when spraying, so most people didn't really hard focus it.
This was like not a weapon that people really liked. I'd be interested to see how this weapon would fare in zero build. One of the few updates we had in chapter, I don't know if it's chapter 2 season 1 or 2, but they added the heavy AR to the game through side grading. So if you like I think you had to bring a scar to a weapon bench and then you could turn it into the AK. And that was one of the few updates we got that season, but it was just like not a good weapon and people didn't really care about it. This Mythic one was a lot better, but it was still just like not it.
This. And finally, if you went to the rig, my favorite drop spot of all time, if you ended up eliminating TNTina, you could get TNTina's Kaboombo. This was essentially a mythic version of the Boombo, but it was actually nerfed from its
like a much better repeater in a way, and like much more inconvenient to use than the explosive repeater. But you could use it in like a similar way where you just kind of like flush people out from behind cover and stuff, and then if you hit them, you get a lot of damage.
original base version, as the original Boombo
That is another one that is heavily rumored to be returning next season.
does more damage, more structure damage, and you could hold for faster shots. However, this season, combining it with the heavy sniper, you could consistently damage players through walls, which I remember OCE winners of FNCS doing repeatedly. A little bit.
Basically, they would just count down 3, 2, 1. The bow player would shoot, and then the heavy sniper player would shoot and break the wall, and then the person behind the wall would just get hit.
Deeper on into
People did double heavy as well. With that same double heavy was probably better, but you would both aim at the person. One shot would break the wall, the other one would hit if you shot at the same time, basically.
this season, Deadpool's hand cannons were also added to the meta. These spawned at the yacht and were part of the Deadpool collaboration. However, these were a little bit too inaccurate to use, but they could have had some really good utility since every single shot healed 3 HP or shield. But again,
I remember being so annoyed when these got added because I wanted to make a video on them and I just did not enjoy using them at all.
it wasn't really worth taking because it didn't have the first shot accuracy. Now, the spray weapons from this season in particular were incredibly powerful, so much so that in Chapter 2 Season 3, the next season, they reduced the headshot multiplier
This is when I quit playing.
from 2 times down to 1.5. This meant by proxy they'd nerfed some of the mythics. Fortia or Flotilla, who knows how it was actually pronounced, was the spawn location for Ocean, who dropped an Ocean's Burst assault rifle and Ocean's...
This is before it was first person. It was still a third person. This bottomless chug jug is another one that is rumored to be coming back next season.
bottomless chug jug. Now, the burst assault rifle did 39 damage to the body, but fired 2 shots that were deadly accurate. Prior to this, the burst assault rifles were heavily underutilized, mainly for its lack of accuracy and large bloom at distance, but with the changes to the burst this season, the spread was much tighter and the burst reduced from 3 shots to 2, making it way more viable, in particularly in this mythic version. The bottomless chug jug was essentially an infinite chug jug that took 15 seconds to pop with a 1-minute cooldown.
So yeah, 15 seconds to use it. It has a minute cooldown and it gives you basically 199 HP because you can't drink it when you're actually 0, but it fills both your white and blue. I never really cared for chug jug as an item, and even if this does return next season, I don't think it'll be that relevant unless they like rework it a lot.
Interestingly enough, it wasn't actually utilized that much in competitive, despite the fact it being an infinite heal, purely because it took 15 seconds to use. Over in the middle of the map, the agency has now been renamed to the Authority, and Midas's drum gun is now nerfed into Jules' drum gun. They removed 1 damage per shot and heavily reduced the fire rate, making it significantly weaker. When you combine this with the reduced headshot multiplier, the Jules drum gun actually ended up not really being that powerful. But you did also get Jules' glider gun, which is essentially the grappler. However, unlike its counterpart, it had glider redeploy.
It was basically a reskin of the Batman grappler,
making it a little bit weaker than the previous season. But the main, most overpowered mythic this season was undoubtedly the ones that dropped at Catty Corner. If you eliminate Kit, the boss here, you would get Kit's charged shotgun.
I think the charged shotgun is another one that's the mythic charge is one that's been rumored to be returning next season. I haven't seen anything about the shockwave launcher myself.
And the Kit's shockwave launcher. Now, Kit's charged shotgun did a max of 226 damage when fully charged, and Kit's shockwave launcher would
I think it may have charged faster as well, but I could be wrong on that. I didn't play very much this season. The shockwave launcher was incredibly broken, and they actually brought this back towards the end of chapter 2, and it was like still mythic rarity, but it would appear all over the place. and it was so busted because you basically have 18 shockwaves on you. Like, you have the 6 in the gun, and then you can have your 12 reserve. And if you eliminated somebody, their gun dropped fully loaded. So as long as you didn't have to use all 6 shockwaves to kill somebody, and they had it, they would drop a full one. And you could just keep doing that. And, like, yeah, every fight was just people shockwaving away.
Use rockets for ammo, and every single one of these would fire a shockwave grenade. This season in particular, it was so powerful because the main form of mobility was crash pads, which didn't send you very far and broke minimal levels of builds. However, shockwave could send you firing through an endgame. Plus, combine the 2 items together, you would have one player who could fire themselves up very high whilst charging the charged shotgun and drop down and hit massive shots on players' heads.
And there was no pump this season. There was just charge tack shoddy, so the charge was actually, like, quite useful.
Even predict you. Now, you may think that's all of the mythics that were in this season. However, there was actually one hidden mythic, which was the mythic mushroom. It had a 1 in 10,000 chance of spawning and gave 100 shield, and for some reason it was only in this season. This is assumedly just because the lore of Midas and his ability to turn things into gold. Now, the next season you all may remember as Marvel season or Stark season. This is where things became a bit of a problem. There were 14 mythics. 14 mythics.
This one is goated.
Now, these were nearly all Marvel themed, which since they were a collaboration item that lasted the entire season, I can only imagine how much money Epic Games made just from Chapter 2 Season 4 alone. Now, up until this point, the loot pools between the pubs and competitive has been basically exactly the same, minor a few items like
I think there's like an early version of the pulse rifle.
Rocket launchers. But with 14 different types of mythics, this started to become quite a problem. Take the Venom Smash and Grab as an example. This was an item that would grab players through boxes and through walls, pull them straight towards you, and you could immediately pull out your shotgun and shoot them straight after. If you, the player this happened to, there was 0 counter to this.
That's actually, they had that in Season 8 as well, which is when I eventually returned to the game. I came back when they vaulted that. Like, I was thinking about coming back. And, like, I was, like, pretty sure I was probably going to do it. And then I was like, that item just looks so annoying when they get rid of it. I'll come back. And then they got rid of it, and I started playing again.
Dr. Doom's mystical bomb fired a massive...
Wait. Was this like the precursor to the Deku Smash and the Hollow Purple?
Bomb that, when exploded, created a large pool of fire right next to players, burning all wood builds and continually creating environmental damage. Thor's Mjolnir Strike does this, and do I really even need to tell you why this is broken? Oh yes, all of these, by the way, have infinite ammo, but just need time to cool down before they can be used again. Thanks to the community feedback and common sense, they removed nearly all of these from the competitive loot pool outside of Dr. Doom's gauntlets, which were relatively balanced. For a brief period, there was the Shadow Midas's drum gun that was added, which had the exact same stats as Jules' drum gun from Chapter 2 Season 3. Interestingly, it only lasted for 1 patch, which is one of the shortest of any mythic items out there. In the same patch, there was the broomsticks that were also added, which would return later in Chapter 2 Season 8, and
so if you guys played during the Dragon Ball update at all, this is the Nimbus Cloud. Like, the Nimbus Cloud was just a reskin of this. I'm very surprised they didn't bring it back for last year's Fortnitemares. Hopefully they do this season, because it's just like a solid item to have in the game.
then be totally forgotten about forever. Since the power creep and number of mythic items in the game had ramped up so high over the last few years, mythics started to lose their importance and just felt like another item in the loot pool. Thankfully, in the next season, Chapter 2 Season 5, they toned down not only the strength of these mythic items, but also the number of them in the season. Since the season had
No, there's got to be a Star Wars mythic.
a large collaboration with Star Wars and the Mandalorian, there were two different Mandalorian items added to this season: the Amban sniper rifle and the Mandalorian's jetpack. The sniper was a single-shot sniper that had a thermal scope similar to the thermal scoped AR, but it also had a melee attack on the alternative fire which could actually cancel your fall damage if you used it while falling. Since the Mandalorian carried both of these items, he could actually snipe you out of the
they made Risky Reels a desert?
sky, not only in pubs but also in competitive. Now the Mandalorian actually had
They were teasing Rocky Reels, bro.
a third mythic item, but you couldn't actually acquire it in this season, which was the E11 blaster rifle. It was programmed into the files, but only actually obtainable in Chapter 3 Season 2 and Season 3. And yes, it was just as inaccurate and useless as the
Imagine how depressing an E11 only LTM would be.
previous counterpart a few seasons ago. Up at Stealthy Stronghold, you could kill the Predator AI to get the Predator's cloaking device.
I think this is like the invisibility gauntlets we have now. This was just like the initial version of it.
While standing still, this would make you almost completely invisible for a space of 30 seconds with a 30-second cooldown. However, when you moved, it made you a little bit more visible. And for pretty obvious reasons, this was never added to the competitive loophole. The community was starting to get pretty frustrated with the fact that every single mythic item was just a collaboration item. But in Chapter 2, Season 6, that all changed. The mythics were now relevant to the season. However, unfortunately, this season was the primal season. This season had the primal shotgun, one of the most busted close-range weapons in Fortnite history.
I think this is like a auto shotty type thing. Like, it's just super annoying, like how the drum shotgun is now.
And of course, it had the Spire Assassin's mythic version of it, where you can see me just jump into a box and 200 to 0 people. This season also had a ton of bows, and of course there was a mythic one to go along with this, which was not actually in competitive, similar to the Recycler, a weapon that used junk ammo, which was also not in competitive. But hands down, the strangest mythic of all time is the Spire Jump Boots, which you get by killing one of these Spire Assassins in one of the towers around the map. Carry this odd, strange ball all the way to the center, which is very difficult to do, and as soon as you put it in this little monolith here, you'll get these Spire Jump Boots. These allowed you to take...
Bro, they were teasing the Fracture event. They had people doing mini games for a lackluster reward.
0 fall damage, and if you triple jump with them, it would actually give you glider redeploy. A cool little side quest, but was almost impossible to do in any tournament. Chapter 2, Season 7 brought a bunch of weird alien stuff, and the mythics were no different, including Zig and Choppy.
This is like the Bender's ray gun, I think, that we recently had in the game, like, or the Bender's ray gun was like a reskin of this. This is another one that's heavily rumored to be returning next season.
It's a ray gun. This thing honestly was not that strong, but it was still out of the competitive loophole, only leaving one mythic in, which was the Sloan's Pulse Rifle, which was basically exactly the same as the Stark Industries Energy Rifle from Chapter 2, Season 4. I know you may look at this right now if you're playing in Chapter 4, Season 2 and think, man, this gun's so busted, but the hip fire on this actually was nowhere near as strong as the current Pulse Rifle, which we'll come back to later on. Once this season had ended, Epic continued the trend of keeping the mythic items relevant to the season in Chapter 2, Season 8, having 3 sideways mythics. These were the sideways minigun, the sideways rifle,
I think these were dirt,
and the sideways scythe. These were unique in the fact that they were the first upgradable mythic items. This was done by finding monster cube parts around the map, meaning you could go from a grey minigun all the way up to a mythic, assuming you could find enough parts. Interesting enough, some of these items actually came back in Chapter 3, Season 2. However, cube parts were not
for a wild week. It was the sideways wild week, I think.
unvaulted, which meant that the mythic rarity was actually impossible to get. This season also had Sloan's Burst Assault Rifle, which rotated
This was so good.
all of the way around the map, starting near Dirty Docks and
Sloan was so hard to fight too. She would make like hecka clones of herself and they would all go crazy on you. Like the Sloan rifle we had in Chapter 3 and the like how difficult she was to fight was like nothing compared to Chapter 2.
landing down to the southeast near Catty Corner. Interestingly enough, this shot 2 bullets per burst, yet had 21 ammo, meaning the final shot would always fire 1 single bullet.
The fire rate was
this
so
season
good.
also continued the trend of having more collaboration items, this time with the Venom symbiote and the Carnage symbiote,
When these got vaulted is when I started playing again.
which were very similar to the Smash and Grab from Chapter 2 Season 4. However, they also gave you increased movement speed, higher jump, and glider redeploy. There was also a Naruto collaboration where they introduced the Paper Bomb Kunai. This was a small throwable explosive that would stick to walls and on impact would do 35 damage.
just,
Not
like,
incredibly
meh.
powerful, but enough to be kept out of the competitive loophole for its build destruction abilities. With the power of weapons across the board overall decreasing, and the upcoming zero build mode having 250 HP inbound, they clearly needed to ramp up the power of each individual
This one
weapon,
is busted.
starting with the Foundation's M.
So, if you guys think the MK Alpha now, I think this one had the same damage as like a gold MK Alpha, but a much higher fire rate, and I think like pretty much no recoil. This is another one that's rumored to be returning next season, and if it does without any changes to how it was, I think this is going to be like the most broken thing in zero build. Like the fire rate on this was ridiculous.
K7 assault rifle. Chapter 3 Season 1 was the start of the spray arc, where all of the most powerful weapons were all heavily spray based. With the shotguns being significantly less powerful, most players in FNCS didn't even run one and just ended up running the MK7 and a Stinger SMG. The mythic rarity of this was the first person mythic item with a damage per second of 230. This is far from the most busted
Yeah, but a lot of these are like close range weapons. Like the accuracy and like the way you could use it while protected is what made this so broken. Whereas like a lot of these you have to be like close to your opponent, but this you just like beam people from across the map.
In terms of damage per second, however, its deadly accuracy when aiming down sights was what made this truly broken. It was obtainable by eliminating the foundation at Sanctuary, and
he was hard to fight though unless you did this. He would like summon a boulder and like one hit you with it.
you can actually do this by just ramping up high with a harpoon, hitting the foundation with that, and knocking him out to fall damage. Another collaborative item that was added was the Spider-Man's web shooters, which was obtained from Spider-Man's backpacks spread around the map. This enabled you to traverse swiftly through the air by shooting at a surface and swinging towards it, and you could pull items towards you in a similar manner to the harpoon if you hit them directly. The original base value of this had 80 charges to be able to use, which in a competitive setting is a lot of free mobility. So this was actually nerfed down to 20 uses only in competitive, and then a further nerf down to 10, yet still maintaining the 80
Yeah, 10 was like pitiful, bro.
in pubs, a nice split that worked for both sides. There was another incredibly busted mythic this season, which was the Gunner's Stinger.
This is another one that's like heavily rumored to be returning next season.
SMG. Hilariously, this had more recoil than any of the lower rarities, so despite having higher damage, it was often
So at the time, the recoil was like a knock against it. However, with like recent SMGs we've had, like the Twin Mag and the Combat SMG, I feel like both of those had more recoil than this. And like this would actually be like easier to use by comparison. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since it was in the game. But back then, it's like this was a slight upgrade over the Stinger SMG, which had none. So a lot of people just ignored this.
not used. Another mythic that was added this season was actually the Victory Crown. Yes, apparently this is a mythic item. The real main use of this is to stream snipe big streamers and flex the fact that you've won over 3,000 games as a gold peely. To fit with the lore of Chapter 3 Season 2, Sloane's Burst AR returned. However, this time it was called Sloane's Striker Burst Assault Rifle rather than Sloane's Burst Assault Rifle. Similar to the MK7 from the previous season, this was now a first-person ADS, which made it significantly easier to hit shots than the previous iteration. The other main mythic this season was the Huntmaster's Saber Thermal Rifle, which interestingly
I forgot this existed.
also moved around the map. Towards the end of the season, a new POI, the Collider, ended up going straight to the middle of the map, where both of these mythics actually ended up. The fact that this POI was in the center of the map, and it had two mythics, was one of the reasons that 3 of 7's FNCS regions were won by players landing at this drop spot. Once the Collider...
Wait, that's crazy. So like the FNCS is like the ultimate tournament essentially at the end of the season, and 3 out of 7 regions winners landed here. I don't know if it was the mythics as much as just like, I don't know, it's been a while. I think this place had like a lot of like coolers and stuff.
that 3 of 7...
Like I don't think that those mythics were that busted. It's like there's a lot of coolers here and also like guaranteed mobility.
FNCS regions
And
were
it's just center, so it's easier to play.
won by players landing at this drop spot. Once the Collider exploded, or whatever went on in the lore this season, Reality Saplings were one of the first mythic items this season. Now you may say, hey, this is not actually a mythic item, and you are correct. However, these were able to give you 4 different mythic
Everyone's getting nostalgia now that started in Chapter 3. This biome was actually dope, like visually.
items from their drop. The Hammer Assault Rifle, 2-shot shotgun, Rapid Fire SMG, and
I forgot this existed.
Cobra DMR. Once you'd planted the seed, every
I think there was like a regular mythic DMR too. Or was that? I think the regular DMR was in this season. And then the Cobra came later. I don't know. I could be wrong.
24 hours, if you cleared the weeds, it would move up in rarity. And since each tournament may only last 3 hours, naturally these were not included in competitive. Later on in the season, there was a Dragon Ball Z collaboration came in with the Kamehameha.
I have the Kamehameha, the Kamehameha.
Bro, they were making fun of Nick 830 even back then.
Pronunciation issues aside, this was a 3-charge item that works very similar to the Iron Man's Unibeam. When activated, the player sits still in the air, and after a short period, the time unleashes a powerful damaging beam, which...
Oh yeah, I forgot about this guy, bro. Darth Vader's lightsaber was so annoying. Was that the one you could throw? Dude, I remember I fought Nick 830 so many times using that, and he would just like throw it at me and then pump me as it hit my builds. Like, I was so irritated. Anytime I fought someone using that, I just knew it was Nick 830 already.
does 100 damage on impact and continually does 40 damage if you manage to hit the aim repeatedly. You were able to dodge this if you used the Nimbus Cloud, which was also another collaboration item which worked very similar to the Silver Surfer's board, which launched you high into the sky. The final season of Chapter 3's Chapter 3 Season 4 was a strange one when it came to mythic items. In the loot pool, there was
Those blobs were cool. That was like the best part of that season.
Evo Chrome Shotgun and the Evo Chrome Burst Rifle. And the more damage you did with these weapons, the more their rarity increased, meaning you could actually get up to Mythic. But here's where things get weird. There's also the Herald's Burst Rifle, which had lower stats in nearly every way, yet it wasn't in competitive, whereas the better upgradable version was. I assume this is just because there were no mythic bosses in competitive, meaning you couldn't get the item from that boss. The same thing could be said about the Inquisitor's Suppressed
I think it was also like an absurd amount of XP to go from legendary to mythic.
SMG as well. Honorable mention to the Howler Claws item, which only lasted for
Hopefully this year's Fortnite Mares is better.
2 days of the Fortnite Mares 2022 event, because it would make you invincible while using it. The trend of having no mythic bosses in the competitive meta continued in Chapter 4 Season 1. The two main mythics this season, the Ageless Champion's Excalibur Rifle and the Ageless Champion's Shockwave Hammer, both were not included in the meta. The baseline weapons of these were already relatively powerful, and these were just slightly stronger versions of these. And it wouldn't be a season of Fortnite without some sort of anime collab, and this time was the Deku Smash, which was just very similar to the Kamehameha. Up until this point, the powerful mythics had been kept
RIP faulty splits, bro.
out of the competitive loot pool, and from what I could tell, everyone seemed to be happy. The casuals enjoy the more overpowered items that are a bit more fun and have more
Also the thunder shotty, bro.
collaboration side of them, whereas competitive doesn't get ruined by incredibly powerful weapons that don't fit a more balanced meta. It seems like everyone was relatively happy with this, so Epic Games naturally decided to change it. Chapter 4 Season 1 also added reality augments, where you could obtain the Mythic Pistol using the Mythic Munitions augment. In Chapter 4 Season 2, they added 5 different mythics to the loot pool. In 3 different locations on the map, you could knock out High Card and get access to High Card's Havoc Suppressed AR. Try saying that 3 times. Thing is, this doesn't really feel like a mythic item because not many players would really ever take this. The pullout time is extremely slow, and it's outclassed in nearly every single way by the Red Eye Assault Rifle. However, upon knocking out High Card, you also get the Vault Card, which will give you access to the enhanced Havoc
This is another one that's heavily rumored to be returning next season.
Shotgun. A shotgun that on release did 250 headshot damage. Thankfully, this was nerfed down to 210. However, this is still the only shotgun in the loot pool that can knock out an opponent from 200 HP in one bullet, making it incredibly powerful. And midway through the game, Loot Island will spawn, and if you capture the flag here, you'll be gifted with the overclocked
Another one that's heavily rumored to be returning next season.
Pulse Rifle. Now, all 3 of these mythics were in the mid-game, and you couldn't get them immediately off the start, with the main goal creating mid-game objectives for players to fight over and have a less boring mid-game, which I think was very much so achieved. And of course, our last 2 items, you know it's going to be a collaboration, the ODM gear and the Thunder Spears. These were essentially just skinned versions of the Spider-Man's web shears. However, they had an alternative fire that, rather than picking up loot from the floor, could just destroy any build you wanted. These were initially removed from the competitive
Playing builds at the end of the season was so tilting.
loot pool for very obvious reasons. However, when Epic Games released the new ranked mode this season, they combined all of the loot pools in public matches and competitive matches to be the exact same. Now there's not much of the season left. However, next season in Chapter 4 Season 3, it seems like any mythics that will be put into the game will also be put into the competitive loot pool. So here's let's hope that it's going to be very balanced. Probably won't be though. If you'd like this Evolution of series, click on
But yeah, that is going to be it for this video. Like I said, it'll be linked down in the description below, but a lot of these mythics are rumored to be returning next season. Not sure if they are or aren't, but I know a lot of my viewers started playing the game within like the past year or 2, so you didn't experience those weapons, and you don't really know what it means when someone says like, hey, this is apparently getting unvaulted. But that was the evolution of all the mythic items in Fortnite. As always, if you guys found this helpful, informative, remember to give a like, subscribe to like some more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.